There is a specific sound a door makes when it opens into a place where time stands still. It is a soft, melodic chime, a mechanical greeting that hasn't changed in 40 years. I stepped out of the drizzle and into the hushed sanctuary of Klein & Sons, shaking the water from my umbrella. The air inside smelled exactly as it had in 1970, of silver polish, velvet, and the distinct metallic scent of old money. I took a deep breath, letting the familiarity settle the tremor in my hands. I am Henry. I am 74 years old. I spent my life hunched over workbenches, looking through loops at the intricate heartbeats of grandfather clocks and pocket watches. I understand gears. I understand tension. I understand that if one tiny cog is out of alignment, the entire mechanism fails. I value precision above all things because precision is the only defense we have against chaos. I walked to the counter, my shoes clicking softly on the checkerboard marble floor. Mr. Klein was there, bent over a ledger. He was the son of the man who sold me the ring, but he was nearly 60 himself now, his hair thinning, his eyes magnified by thick spectacles. "Henry," he said, looking up with a genuine smile. "Right on time." "Punctuality is the politeness of kings, Arthur," I replied, placing the small navy blue velvet box on the glass counter. I rested my hand on top of it for a moment. Inside was the center of my universe, Eleanor's ring. 5-carat flawless solitaire set in platinum. I had eaten ramen noodles and skipped bus fares for 2 years to buy that ring. I had worked double shifts repairing watches until my eyes burned to pay for it. It wasn't just a piece of carbon. It was the crystallized proof of my love for a woman who deserved the world. Eleanor had worn it every day for 40 years, until her fingers swelled in the hospital. Since then, it had rested in the wall safe behind her portrait in my study, waiting for the right moment. The moment had arrived. My granddaughter, Sophie, was graduating from medical school in 2 weeks. She had Eleanor's eyes and my stubbornness. She deserved the legacy. Klein asked, putting on his white cotton gloves. "Please," I said, "and maybe polish the band." Klein nodded. He opened the box. The diamond winked under the halogen track lighting. To the naked eye, it was magnificent. Large, clear, demanding attention. Klein picked it up with a reverence that professionals reserve for true quality. He brought his jeweler's loupe to his eye, holding the ring up to the light. I waited, watching the dust motes dance in the air. I expected the usual compliment. Instead, silence. The silence stretched. It grew heavy, filling the room like water rising in a sinking ship. Klein frowned. He lowered the loupe. He looked at the ring, then at me, then back at the ring. He didn't speak. He turned and walked to the back of the shop, to the heavy microscope that sat on his workbench. I called out, a flicker of unease starting in my gut. He didn't answer. I heard the click of the microscope light. I watched his back as he adjusted the focus. He sat there for a long time, too long. When he finally stood up and turned around, his face was pale. He walked back to the counter, but he didn't slide the ring back to me. He held it in his gloved hand, protecting it, or perhaps protecting me from it. "Henry," he said softly. His voice lacked its usual professional boom. "I need you to tell me, has this ring been out of your possession?" "No," I said, confused. "It's been in my safe for 3 years, since Eleanor passed." Klein took a breath. He looked down at the counter, unable to meet my eyes. "Henry, I don't know how to tell you this." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course it is." "The setting is the same," Klein said, his voice gentle but firm. "The platinum band, the engraving, that's all original." He looked up at me then, his eyes full of pity. "The stone is glass, Henry. It's a cubic zirconia, a very high-quality one, cut to mimic the dimensions, but—" The world tilted. The floor seemed to drop away beneath my feet. I gripped the edge of the mahogany counter, my knuckles turning white. "Check again," I rasped. "You're wrong. You need new glasses, Arthur." "I don't need to check it," he said. He led me behind the counter. I sat at the microscope. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely adjust the eyepieces. I looked. I knew diamonds. I wasn't a gemologist, but I knew the landscape of that diamond. I knew the tiny microscopic feather inclusion near the girdle that only I knew was there. I looked for it. The stone under the lens was perfect. It was sterile. It was clear, flawless, and utterly lifeless. It lacked the fire, the chaotic brilliance of natural carbon. It was a cold, dead piece of synthetic material masquerading as my life's work. I pulled away from the scope, nausea rolling in my stomach like a tide of oil. "It's gone," I whispered. "I'm so sorry, Henry," Klein said. "Someone swapped it." I stood up, swaying. Who? Who could have done this? The ring was in the wall safe. The safe was a Diebold, installed in 1980. It wasn't digital. It was a mechanical dial. Left, right, left. Only two people knew the combination. Me and Michael, my son. The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow to the chest. I staggered back against the workbench. Michael. He had moved back in 6 months ago. "Just for a while, Dad," he had said, standing on my porch with 2 suitcases and a bruised ego after his second divorce and a failed restaurant venture that had burned through his savings. I had believed him. I had welcomed him. I had thought, finally he's growing up. Finally he wants to be a son. He had been so solicitous, making tea, driving me to my cardiologist, fixing the gutters. And always asking about my finances. "Dad, that insurance policy." I realized now, standing in the quiet of the jewelry shop, that his affection wasn't love. It was a reconnaissance mission. He hadn't been fixing the house. He had been casing the joint. Klein put a hand on my shoulder. "No," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. "No police." I took the velvet box. I put the fake ring back inside. I snapped the lid shut. The sound was like a bone breaking. "Thank you, Arthur," I said. I walked out of the shop. The rain had turned into a downpour. I got into my car, a 10-year-old sedan that I kept in pristine condition, and just sat there. I stared at the wipers slicing back and forth. Swish, swish. Truth, lie. Truth, lie. My son, my flesh and blood. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had held when he scraped his knees. The man who had stood at his mother's funeral and wept. He had stolen her. He had pried the gemstone out of her legacy, sold it, and replaced it with a piece of costume jewelry, laughing at me the whole time. He let me walk around thinking I was protecting a treasure when I was guarding a piece of glass worth $50. I started the car. I drove home on autopilot, navigating the wet streets through a blur of grief. I pulled into the driveway of the house I built. The lights were on in the kitchen. Warm, inviting yellow light. It looked like a home. It looked like safety. I opened the front door. The smell of garlic and basil hit me. Michael was cooking. I walked into the kitchen. He was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of marinara sauce. He was wearing one of my old aprons. He was humming a tune, some classic rock song he loved. He looked healthy. He looked happy. He looked normal. He turned when he heard me. He smiled, a wide, easy grin that used to make me proud. "Hi," he chirped. "You're back early. How was town? I'm making your favorite, spaghetti and meatballs." He tapped the wooden spoon against the side of the pot. Tap, tap, tap. I stood in the doorway, clutching the velvet box in my pocket. I looked at him. I looked at his hands. Strong, capable hands that were currently grating Parmesan cheese over a bowl. Those were the hands. Those were the hands that had opened my safe. Those were the hands that had taken the ring off the velvet cushion. Those were the hands that had pried the prongs open, removed the diamond, and set the fake. Those were the hands that had desecrated his mother's memory for what? A gambling debt? A car payment? I watched him grate the cheese, back and forth. Casual. He didn't look like a thief. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like my son. And that was the horror of it. I sat at the kitchen table, watching my son grate Parmesan cheese, realizing that the hands preparing my dinner were the same hands that had desecrated my wife's memory. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lunge across the table and strike him until he admitted it. But if you've ever sat across from someone you love and realized that the monster under your bed is actually your own flesh and blood, hit that subscribe button. Because I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He thought he swapped a stone. He didn't know he had just swapped his inheritance for a prison cell. Michael asked, stopping the grater. "You okay? You look pale." He sounded concerned. He sounded like a good son. It made me want to vomit. I don't feel well," I lied. My voice was steady, despite the rage boiling in my blood. "I think I picked up a bug in town." "Oh no," Michael said, turning down the heat on the stove. "Do you want some ginger ale?" "I think I'll just go to my study," I said. "I need to sit." "Okay, Dad, I'll save you a plate." "I will," I said. I walked past him. I walked past the traitor in the apron. I went into my study and closed the door. I locked it. I went to the safe. I spun the dial. Right 20, left 10, right 5. It clicked open. I looked inside. The stack of savings bonds was there, the deed to the house, and the empty spot where the ring box usually sat. I put the box back. I closed the safe. I needed proof. I knew he did it, but knowing wasn't enough. Michael was a liar. He was a manipulator. If I confronted him now, he would deny it. He would say I was senile. He would say I lost it. He would say the jeweler was lying. He would gaslight me until I doubted my own sanity. I needed hard evidence. I sat in my leather chair and waited. I watched the clock on the wall. Tick, tock. At 8 p.m., I heard the front door open and close. Michael was going out. Thursday night, poker night. I stood up. I moved to the window and watched his car back out of the driveway. He was driving the BMW he claimed he was leasing, but which I suspected he was barely making payments on. As soon as his taillights disappeared, I moved. I went upstairs to his bedroom, my old guest room. I opened the door. The smell hit me instantly. Stale beer, unwashed laundry, and the sharp chemical scent of desperation. The room was a mess. Clothes piled on the floor, boxes half unpacked. I started to search. I was a clockmaker. I knew how to look for small things. I checked the obvious places first. Under the mattress, in the sock drawer, in the pockets of his jackets. Nothing. He wouldn't keep the ring. He needed money. He would have sold it or pawned it immediately. I needed a receipt. I needed a paper trail. I searched his desk. Overdue notices, final warnings from credit card companies, a letter from a lawyer regarding back alimony. He was drowning. He was broke. I looked around the room, trying to think like him. Where would he hide shame? My eyes landed on the bookshelf. On the top shelf sat an old vintage radio, a Zenith Transoceanic. I had given it to him for his 16th birthday. He had loved it back then. He kept it as a decoration now. I walked over to it. I turned it around. It was heavy. I popped the back panel, the one that covered the battery compartment. It was empty of batteries. But taped to the inside of the plastic cover was a slip of pink paper. I peeled it off. It was a pawn ticket. Easy Cash Lenders, located on 5th Street, down in the district where the streetlights were always broken. The date was 3 weeks ago. 5-cent diamond solitaire, platinum band. Inscription, Forever H&E. Loan amount, $8,000. I stared at the number. The ink seemed to swim before my eyes. $8,000. He had sold a ring worth $50,000, a ring that carried the soul of his mother for $8,000. Probably to cover a gambling debt, probably to buy into a game he had no business playing. He had sold my heart for pennies on the dollar. The grief that had been choking me finally broke, snapping like a tension spring wound too tight. But it didn't dissolve into tears. It solidified. It hardened into a cold, mechanical rage. It was the kind of anger that doesn't shout. It was the kind of anger that plans. I took my phone from my pocket. I snapped a clear photo of the pawn ticket. Then I took a piece of tape from his desk dispenser. I taped the ticket back inside the radio cover exactly where I found it. I snapped the back panel on. I left the room. I left the door exactly as it was. I went back to my own bedroom. I turned off the lights and laid down on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the darkness. Michael thought he had gotten away with it. He thought his father was a foolish old man who couldn't tell the difference between a diamond and a piece of glass. He thought I would give that ring to Sophie, and she would find out years later or never know, and he would be safe. He didn't know that he was living with a man who had spent 50 years fixing broken things. But some things cannot be fixed. Some things must be dismantled, piece by piece, until they can no longer function. I closed my eyes. I listened to the house settle. I plotted. I wasn't just going to get the ring back. I was going to construct a trap so precise, so inescapable, that it would snap his neck socially and legally. I would make him choke on that cubic zirconia. I woke up with the sunrise, my body stiff, my mind sharp and cold as a scalpel. I didn't make coffee. I didn't read the paper. I dressed in my work clothes, dark trousers, a pressed white shirt, because today was a work day. I had a job to do. I had to repair the most broken thing in my life. I drove to the pawn shop. The neighborhood was a stark contrast to the manicured lawns of my suburb. Here, the buildings were boarded up, the sidewalks cracked, the people moving with a weary caution. Easy cash lenders sat between a liquor store and a bail bondsman, its neon sign flickering even in the morning light. I walked in. The air smelled of dust and desperation. Behind the bulletproof glass, a man with a thick neck and suspicious eyes looked up from his phone. "Huh?" he grunted. I pulled out my phone and held up the photo of the pawn ticket I had taken in Michael's room. Then I slapped my driver's license against the glass. "Ticket number 4092, I said, my voice steady. 5-carat diamond ring. It was pawned by my son, Michael, 3 weeks ago. It belongs to me." The pawnbroker's eyes narrowed. "Ticket holder has rights. I can get one," I said, leaning closer to the glass. "I can have the police here in 10 minutes. I can tell them about the stolen property you accepted without verifying ownership. I can have them audit your books." I pulled out my checkbook. He looked at me. He looked at the checkbook. He did the math. "Wait here," he said. He disappeared into the back. I waited, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. What if it was gone? What if he had already sold it? He returned a moment later, holding a small plastic bag. He slid it into the tray and pushed it under the glass. I opened the bag. There it was. The platinum band was dull, dirty, but the stone was alive. Even under the harsh fluorescent lights of the pawn shop, it held a fire that no glass could mimic. I picked it up. It felt warm in my hand, heavy with history. "You got lucky, Pops," the man said. "It was in the melt bin, scheduled to be broken down tomorrow." I wrote the check. It was for nearly $9,000, the loan plus the exorbitant interest. It burned a hole in my bank account, wiping out my emergency fund. But I didn't care. I had Eleanor back. I walked out of that shop clutching the ring in my pocket like a grenade. I drove home. I parked the car. I walked into the house and went straight to the safe. I took out the velvet box with the fake ring. I put the real ring in my pocket. I left the fake one in the box. Then I waited. Michael came downstairs around noon, looking rough. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaky. A hangover? Or maybe just the guilt eating him alive. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled, pouring himself coffee. "Good morning, Michael," I said from the kitchen table. I was reading a book, or pretending to. He stiffened. "About the future?" I said. "About money?" I'm worried about cash flow, son. The house needs repairs. I paused, letting the bait dangle. I'm thinking of selling some assets, I continued, to make sure you're taken care of in the will. His eyes lit up. It was subtle, but I saw it. Ah? He asked, trying to sound casual. Stocks, mostly. I looked at him. And the ring. Your mother's ring. He froze. His coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. I could see the gears turning in his head. He knew the ring in the safe was fake. If I tried to sell it to a stranger, I would find out immediately. He would be exposed. I I don't know, Dad. It's sentimental. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills, Michael, I said firmly. I think I should get it appraised. Panic. Pure panic. He blurted out. A friend of mine. He buys estate jewelry. He pays cash. No questions asked. Of course. He was trying to cover his tracks. That's kind of you, son, but I think I'd prefer a professional, he asked, sweating now. Mr. Klein, I said. Arthur Klein. He sold me the ring originally. Michael went pale. Mr. Klein was an expert. He would spot the fake in a second. Excellent idea, Henry, I said to myself, ignoring him. In fact, let's do it tonight. I'll invite Mr. Klein over for dinner, a private appraisal. I looked at Michael. And let's invite Sophie. She's graduating soon. She should be part of this decision. Michael looked like a trapped animal. He couldn't say no. If he refused, it would look suspicious. He had to agree. He had to hope at maybe, just maybe, the fake was good enough to fool an old jeweler in the dim light of a dining room. Or maybe he thought he could interrupt, cause a distraction, knock the ring off the table before Klein got a good look. Okay, he whispered. Okay, Dad. The dinner was set for 7 p.m. I spent the afternoon cooking. I made a roast. I set the table with the good china. I polished the silverware until it gleamed. Sophie arrived first. She looked beautiful, bright, and full of hope. She hugged me tight. Grandpa, just family business, sweetheart, I said, kissing her cheek. Michael was already at the table, nursing a glass of scotch. He was already drunk. I could smell it on him. He wouldn't look at me. He stared at the tablecloth, his leg bouncing nervously. Mr. Klein arrived at 7 sharp. He was wearing a suit. He carried a small leather satchel. Henry, he said, shaking my hand. Arthur. We sat down. The atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. We ate in relative silence, the only sounds the clinking of silverware and Michael's heavy breathing. When the plates were cleared, I stood up. Arthur, I said, I asked you here because I'm considering selling Eleanor's ring. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the velvet box. I placed it in the center of the table. Michael, I said, turning to my son, why don't you open it? Show Mr. Michael looked at the box like it was a bomb. His hand shook as he reached for it. He fumbled with the clasp. The lid popped open. The fake ring glittered under the chandelier. It was bright, flashy, and utterly hollow. Sophie gasped. Oh, Grandpa. Mr. Klein leaned forward. He didn't pull out his loupe. He didn't need to. He had seen the real ring this morning. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He picked up the ring. He held it up to the light. He turned it over in his fingers. Then he looked at Michael. This is a lovely piece of glass, Klein said. His voice was calm, professional, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. Michael flinched. Sophie? Asked, confused. It's a cubic zirconia, Klein continued, looking Michael dead in the eye. A very good one. The setting is platinum, the engraving is authentic. But the diamond... Michael stood up so fast his chair fell over backward with a crash. He shouted, his face turning blotchy red. You don't know what you're talking about. Sit down, Michael, I said calmly. He pointed a shaking finger at Klein. He's lying. Or maybe Dad switched it. Yeah, maybe he sold it years ago and forgot. He's getting senile. He turned to Sophie, desperate. Grandpa's losing his memory, Soph. He probably sold it to pay bills and his brain just... I took a sip of my water. I set the glass down gently. Sit down, Michael, I repeated. My voice was low, dangerous. He looked at me. He saw something in my eyes he hadn't seen before. Not the gentle clockmaker, the father who was done. He sat. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the real ring. I placed it on the table next to the velvet box. The difference was blinding. The real diamond caught the light from the chandelier and exploded with fire. It sparkled with blues and reds and deep, infinite whites. Next to it, the fake ring looked like a piece of dull ice. "I bought this back this morning," I said quietly. I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out the copy of the pawn ticket I had printed. I tossed it onto his plate. It landed face up. Sophie picked it up. She read it. Her hand flew to her mouth. She looked at her father with horror. "Michael," she whispered. Michael froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking gray and corpse-like. He looked at the ticket. He looked at the ring. He looked at me. "You stole from your mother," I said. "You stole from your daughter's inheritance. And you tried to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy." Michael stammered. Tears of self-pity sprang to his eyes. "It was a loan, I swear. I was going to get it back. I had a sure thing." I asked. "You sold a $50,000 ring for $8,000. You were never going to get it back." He cried. "I'm in debt." "Then you should have asked," I said. "But you didn't ask." I picked up the real ring. I turned to Sophie. She reached out, trembling. I slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "This is yours now, Sophie," I said. "Take it. Go home. Lock your door. Do not trust anyone with it." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. She pulled her hand back, cradling it against her chest. Then I turned to Michael. I picked up the fake ring. I held it out to him. "This is your inheritance," I said. He stared at it. "I went to my lawyer this afternoon," I continued. "I updated the will. The house, the stocks, the everything goes to Sophie." I dropped the fake ring into his palm. It felt light, cheap. "It's worth about as much as your word," I said. I pointed to the door. "Dad, please," he begged, falling to his knees. "Where will I go?" "I don't care," I said. "You have a ring. Sell it. Get $50. The locks will be changed by morning," I added. "If you come back, I will call the police and show them that pawn ticket. Attempted grand larceny, elder abuse." Michael cried. He begged. He pleaded. He looked at Sophie, but she turned her face away. He looked at Klein, who stared at him with cold judgment. Finally, he stood up. He clutched the fake ring in his fist. He walked to the door, his shoulders slumped, a broken man destroyed by his own avarice. The door closed behind him. The lock clicked. The house was quiet. I sat back in my chair. I looked at Sophie. I looked at Klein. "Thank you, Arthur," I said. He nodded solemnly. I took a sip of my wine. It tasted bitter, but clean. The house was empty of lies. It was lonely, yes, but it was clean. And for the first time in 6 months, the time was exactly right.